What the researchers set out to do here is number one, first, determine if omega-3 fatty acids actually help reduce the risk of death from cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, so on and so forth, or along those lines. Then, if it did, what is the optimal dose? The reason that's important is this, because the dosage I'm showing you right here is more exploratory. They felt very secure at saying 840 milligrams a day help reduce the risk of these events down by about 8%. But beyond that, they didn't feel as secure, although the outcomes were quite extraordinary. We're going to focus more on that exploratory data to give you an idea of what the potential of omega-3s may actually be when larger samples of these particular groups can be tested and tried. So what they did was this. They looked at 13 randomized controlled trials involving 127,477 individuals. So they had a nice pooling so the data could come out with a nice bell curve or power sample of statistics or whatever it is. So basically they felt confident in that. But the exploratory data is quite amazing. And that's what we're going to look at in regard to this particular study itself. So to proceed as follows, we're going to read this little snippet here. For major vascular events, the relative risk ratio was, let's go right into it. For each 1,000 milligrams a day of marine omega-3 supplementation lowered the risk of cardiovascular disease, I assume events, by 17%, and the risk of major vascular events by 17% without evidence of heterogeneity, which means strange stuff in the statistics. So, for every 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram per day in regard to the exploratory data, quite a dramatic, significant reduction in the risk. As we look more through the exploratory data, which I'll have links to the full study for you to look on your own, let's go to the next part. A dose response analysis based on 58 placebo-controlled trials estimated that each 1 gram, 1,000 milligrams a day increase of marine omega-3 reduced triglyceride levels by 5.9 milligrams a deciliter, and such linear association. So we're saying linear, basically if you break out the slope, so you're looking at 5.9. If it's a straight linear association, then 2 grams would give you about 11.8. But I assume there's some sloping in there, so I don't want to interject publisher bias. But to repeat, for each 1 gram a day increase in marine omega-3 reduced triglyceride levels by 5.9 milligrams a deciliter, and such linear association did not plateau even at 7 grams a day. Nevertheless, quote, our dose response analysis was highly exploratory and should be interpreted cautiously, meaning they want to do more studies to at least validate this data. And part of the reason too is in the larger dosage trials, people may have chronic health conditions, be on medications, and so on and so forth, which could introduce what's called, for those not familiar, confounding factors, which could play a role in influencing the figures. So to proceed as follows. Now, the omega-3s varied through a lot of the trials. So I want to read this one excerpt as well to give you a better understanding about the variety. The range of marine omega-3 supplementation dose was 376 to 4,000 milligrams a day. Remember, it was not all done in the same dosage because it took a collection of trials and reviewed it. Although the relative proportion of EPA and DHA varied among different trials, and some only tested EPA alone. All right, for now, let's move from the full study and go to the public release, which is basically what they released to the general public because it's not as technical as the full study, which we're going to link towards the end. The findings showed that people who took daily omega-3 fish oil supplements compared with those who took a placebo lowered their risk for most cardiovascular disease outcomes except stroke. Yeah, for stroke, including an 8% reduced risk for heart attack and coronary heart disease death. The association was particularly evident at higher doses of omega-3 fish oil supplementation. The finding may suggest that a marine omega-3 supplementation dosage above the 840 milligram day used in most randomized clinical trials may provide greater reduction in cardiovascular disease. Given that several million people experience these CVD events worldwide each year, even small reductions in risk can translate into hundreds of thousands of heart attacks and CVD deaths avoided, according to the researchers. And that's at 840 milligrams. So imagine if you get that same translation going 160 milligrams higher, just barely up there, to a 17% risk reduction. That is just extraordinary, just at 1,000 milligrams. But to proceed and conclude as follows, quote, although public health recommendations should focus on increasing fish consumption, having an overall heart-healthy diet, being physically active, and having other healthy lifestyle practices, the study suggests that omega-3 supplementation may have a role in appropriate patients, quoting the researcher. So basically, as you see, and by the way, this typo in regard to the title was there on its own. I didn't type it in. But basically what you're seeing is exploratory data, which looks extremely promising in reducing the risk. And the reason I decided to cover this research was because at 17% at 1,000 milligrams per 1,000 milligrams possibly a day, that is just astounding and definitely needs further exploration, because 2 grams per day, if it's a linear relationship, reduction in triglycerides or possibly reduction in cardiovascular disease events, is just incredibly beneficial. Again, I hope you find this information of great use. I'll link to the full study so you can look at it at your own. And I hope, once again, to see you all again in 7 days. Thank you very much for listening. Ralph signing off. And again, we don't do any broadcasting out there, so if you'd like, just subscribe to the channel. We don't do any ads or anything like that anyways. Again, Ralph signing off. Thank you for listening. I look forward to see you all in 7 days. Catch you all in a bit.